Good morning, everyone. Try to guess what we are talking about today. Seriously, Ca' Foscari is closed. You know why? We are currently experiencing an epidemic, a biological and a sociological one. Both have already been well described by the ancients. I assure you that there's nothing new, and we will see it. Waited a while to produce some material. I hope that the situation would improve soon, but this was not the case. We must think that this way of meeting will henceforth be normal to us. First of all, I will produce these pills of classical culture in which I put together ancient and modern things. I ask all my students to subscribe to my Moodle. Lessons will be online 3 times a week: Monday, Wednesday and Friday. I'll give you some exercises. This serves to get your feedback. Please answer and make me feel your presence. So, let's talk about the plague. The coronavirus is, by definition, of viral origin. Plague is of bacterial origin. But from the point of view of ancient world, it naturally makes no difference, because the ancients know neither bacteria nor virus. So, let's start with good things. The bacteria were discovered in 1676 by the self-taught businessman and scientist Anton van Leeuwenhoek, the inventor of the microscope. He called them with the Latin word animalcula, small living beings, because he saw that they moved. It was not until 1838 that the German naturalist Christian Gottfried Ehrenberg, in the treatise Die Infusionsstärken als vollkommene Organismen, the infusion animals as perfect organisms, coined a new word, bacterium, immediately flanked by the German adaptation batteri, inspired by the Greek bakterion, stick. For example, this is called bacchetta in Italian. This is because most of the organisms he had observed had a long shape. Here you see the spread of the word bacterium in various languages. Animalculum is, in Italian we say that, dead track. Bacterium and batteri are almost contemporary. After 6 or 7 years, it was also said in French. A few years later, a German scientist, Kohn, is annoyed by this Greekism. He wants to create a pure Latin word because the world of science wrote in Latin. Bacterium in Greek means stick. How do you say stick in Latin? It's said bacillum, diminutive of baculum, stick. In Italian, bacillo is still said as a synonym, more popular, of bacterium. Let's talk now about Latin and viruses. Viruses are much smaller than bacteria, about 100, and can't be observed with an optical microscope. They were therefore discovered only later. The first virus, that of the tobacco mosaic, was described in 1892 by the Russian botanist Dmitry Ivanovsky, and its particular nature was identified in 1898, 6 years later, by the Dutch colleague Martin Beyering. This is its structure, but the two scientists didn't know it. Only in the 1950, Watson and Crick discovered the structure of nucleic acids. Therefore, they called this pathogen with another Latin word, virus in English, which literally means poisonous juice. Lucretius, a poet we will talk about again, who lives in the age of Cicero and Catullus, that we saw in another lesson, writes a work, the De Rerum Natura, on nature, which speaks of natural phenomena. He uses viruses in the sense of salt, referring to sea water. Here, for example, Lucretius is talking about the water cycle. Sea water is salty. There are hexameters. Do you remember how an hexameter works? Because in the depth of the earth it spreads everywhere. In fact, the salt and the liquid element are filtered. It flows back and meets at the source of the river. Why is salt called poison? Because it's bitter and makes the water undrinkable. I show you another case of the word virus used by the greatest Latin poet, Virgil, who lived in the next literary generation as one of the Augustan poets. You know Virgil for the Aeneid, but in fact he also wrote something else, including a poem, the Georgics, which dealt with agriculture. This is the first book, the one on cultivating fields, and serves to explain why man has to work hard. Because and why fatigue and pain exist. This justification of evil in the world has a specific term, and it's called theodicy. At the beginning of the Georgics, it said that before Jupiter's intervention, man lived in a sort of heaven on earth. So, for example, snakes were not poisonous, wolves were not predators, the sea was always calm, and later Jupiter decides to create obstacles for them not to be idle. And the two verses we see, always hexameters, he writes, "He endowed the black snakes with dangerous poison, and he ordered that the wolves prey, and then the sea becomes stormy." Enough for today. I end with the disticon, quite sexist, from the late Latin anthology. Florus. Omnis mulier intra pectus celat virus pestilens, dulce dela brislo cuntur corde vivunt noxio. Every woman has a deadly poison in her chest. They speak softly with their lips, but they live with a hostile heart. So we are far away from the hatred and love of Catullus, of which we will speak again. So, as I said, enough for today. There are already enough dangers. Let's try to avoid at least to lose each other. Please keep in touch, write in the forum that I have set up, talk in chat, talk to me. For the next lesson, please review the etymology and origin of the words bacterium and virus and do the little exercise I prepared. Please tell me how many of you are still in Italy and how many came back home. See you and best.